Okay. Hello, everyone. Hi. Thank you for the wonderful opening remarks. I know we got cut right before we were able to finish, but thanks, Kate, for giving us the logistical roundup. And welcome to our first keynote on identity polarization in Nigeria. I'm very excited to introduce our speaker, Dr. Medinat Abdulazeez Malefakis. Let me say a few words about Dr. Malefakis. She is a research and information analyst for West, East, and Southern Africa at the ACAPs program hosted by NRC, or the Norwegian Refugee Council. Before this, she was a global postdoctoral researcher at the Berlin Social Science Center, research fellow at the United States Institute for Peace, the Resolve Network there, and junior researcher at the Max Planck Institute in Halle, Germany. She also obtained a bachelor's in history and both master's and doctorate degrees in international studies. And her research interests vary from terrorism, violent extremism, religious fundamentalism, humanitarian displacement, social and violent conflicts, and others. So I'll hand it over to Dr. Malefakis now, and I'll be here moderating and looking at your questions in the chat. So please feel free to drop them there anytime, and we can go over them in a little Q&A session after. So thanks. Go ahead, Dr. Medinat.
Thank you very much, Mira. Good day, everybody, and thank you very much for having me on the conference. I am going to share my screen now so we can just go straight into the presentation. Okay, everything's good. Right. So today I am going to be speaking on the topic social justice and identity polarization in northern and southern Nigeria. And in preparation for this keynote, I was thinking about the topic of the conference, naturally. And the term social justice for me particularly stuck out because I realized that the remarks I will be making on identity polarization in Nigeria might actually complicate the idea of social justice rather than clarify it. Some of the questions that I hope this talk would provoke include the fact that what do notions of social justice look like if the social is not marked by an idea of equality? And what do notions of social justice also look like if people do not see themselves as equals, but they rather think of each other based on notions of difference and opposing identities? I also hope that at the end of this talk, people will start to ask how we can contextualize social justice when people live by notions of social identity that pits them against each other rather than unites them. And the reasons why I'm starting with this question, all of these questions, is because the Nigerian case study that I am about to discuss here, it is a case in point for all of these questions that I have tried to raise and that I hope that the talk would raise. To discuss identity polarization and social justice, I have chosen 3 situational examples. The first is the Boko Haram insurgency that happened in the northeastern part of Nigeria, starting in around the 2000s and up until it's still an ongoing situational moment. The second example I would use would be the Me Too movements in northern and southern Nigeria. This started in 2017, the second happened in 2019. And of course, the last example is the most recent, the NSAS movement that happened in southern Nigeria, started in Lagos before it spread to the other parts of Nigeria. I would like to start first with what identity formation is in the general context and how identities are formed in the Nigerian context. As we all know, identity formation in every part of the world is as complicated as it is multifaceted. And we understand that today, identity is far more complex than the unchangeable essence of ethnicity or race that a person carries with them. And because every person identifies with myriads of ideas, norms, cultures, and subcultures, it's possible that one person can mobilize overlapping and entangled identities, and they can suit this to their concerns or their intentions. And while the most evident identity markers might be religion, ethnicity, or culture, contemporarily, the community we live in, the political ideas we subscribe to, our personality type, our position on a social ladder, and our sexual leanings have all also become identity markers. And because identity markers are very versatile, it means that one person can claim and mobilize multiple identities, depending on the situation that person finds themselves or the wish or aims that the person wishes to accomplish. I'm going to narrow it down now to the Nigerian context, how one person can mobilize or can have multiple identities. This is a map of Nigeria and a geographical expression of the linguistic divisions in the country. As we can see, Nigeria has over 250 ethnic groups with more than 525 different languages. The biggest ethnic groups are the ones represented on the map. There's the Hausa and the Fulani in the north of Nigeria with the yellow. There's the Yoruba in the southwest, and then the Igbo in the southeast. These might be the three major or the biggest language groups, but the fact that there are smaller languages also means that there's subdivisions of identity markers specifically for language in Nigeria. Apart from language, Nigeria has about 90 million Muslims and 90 million Christians, approximately, in its about 200 million population. But while Christianity and Islam might be the biggest identity markers when it comes to religion, polarization of identity is further entrenched when Christians, first of all, identify themselves either as Protestants or as Catholics or as evangelicals before they recognize themselves as Christians. And when it comes to Islam, for example, Muslims will first of all identify as Sunnis or Shiites or Tijaniya or Qadiriya before they identify as Muslims. So they are not just Muslims first, they are Sunni Muslims or they are Shiite Muslim before they are Muslims. The situation I have tried to explain here, it shows that ethnicity and religion are the two most important markers of identity for most people in Nigeria. But between the two of them, religion is definitely the most potent identity marker. But apart from the two of them, apart from ethnicity and apart from religion, there are regional identities. There's identity by age because Nigeria has a very potent gerontocratic structure where the elders are respected and expected to have more wisdom than the young people. There's also gender-based identity that is very potent in Nigeria, and this is marked, just like in other countries, by the very vibrant patriarchal structure in the country. And of course, there's class identities. Because of all of this, Nigeria's social fabric consistently consists of a complex and dynamic web of layering divisions and subdivisions, intertwined so tightly and in certain cases so loosely that it becomes difficult to keep tab of the start or the beginning of an identity marker from the end of it. And in this multi-ethnic, multi-religious, and multi-identity setup, cultural and political life is moved by a continuous struggle over identities and affiliations with different groups. These struggles, they have played out both online and offline, and subdivisions are used to categorize or to deny people in groups and subgroups. And what these continuous struggles continue to do is to amplify the disunity in the country. And because of this disunified outlook that the social fabric of Nigeria has, successive governments have employed phrases like unity in diversity, united we stand, divided we fall, in an attempt to consolidate divided identities. But as we can see, what is happening currently in Nigeria, or what the social fabric looks like, is what the SY politician of Nigeria, Obafemi Awolowo, once declared. And that is that Nigeria is not a nation, but a mere geographical expression. And there are no Nigerians in the same sense as there are the English or the Welsh or French. And the word Nigeria continues to merely be a distinctive appellation to distinguish between those who live within the boundaries of Nigeria from those who do not. And the reason for this is because each of the ethnic groups in Nigeria, for instance, is a nation by itself. And each of them, they have their specific heritage, they have their specific language, and they have their specific culture. So the question to ask here is, how did these groups, who were or who are distinct enough to constitute a nation by themselves, become fellow citizens in a single country? And how did this country manage or mismanage social interactions so much that the basis of diversity, like language and religion, have now become the roots of polarized identities? The first answer to this question is often sought in colonization. It's because, to start with, the Niger area or Nigeria was a British colony. And as destinies of colonies were decided on European conference tables, so also was Nigeria partitioned to the British Crown in the Berlin Conference of 1884-85. The Niger area, as Nigeria was known then, was home to different African civilizations, such as the Nok and Igbo-Ukwu cultures. This area, Nigeria, then comprised of kingdoms, empires, and city-states that dated back many centuries, for example, the Oyo Empire, the Kanem-Borno Empire, and the Songhai Empire. And these groups who existed in the Niger area or Nigeria that we know, they had different linguistic, cultural, and religious groups, and they existed as autonomous and sophisticated entities. They interacted between themselves through trade and political alliances. And the people and their systems, they were not barbaric or retrograded. In some instances, for example, in northern Nigeria, the political systems were so sophisticated that the British decided to use this same political system to administer them through the indirect rule system. So this is how sophisticated political structures were in Nigeria at this time. But in order to be able to rule these different kingdoms, the British colonialists pulled together the different groups and created protectorates. These political entities were created only for administrative convenience and to ensure the easy and more effective domination and exploitation of the colonized. The people in this area, even under colonialism, they would not renounce their unique ethnic, cultural, or religious features. But the British made no attempt to harness their diversity for integration or to accommodate the differences amongst the people. Instead, colonialists undermined and abused existing political structures, creating mistrust and cleavages among the different groups, all for the success of the colonial enterprise. What colonialism ended up doing was to highlight the differences between people instead of unifying them into a nation. What colonialism ended up doing was to breed disunity amongst this group of people. And at the time of independence, people in the protectorates, they had already gotten used to identifying with their own respective ethnic groups instead of a national identity. However, we can talk about how colonialism did not unify the different groups that the British met in the Niger area. But colonialism cannot be the only culprit. It cannot be the only institution to blame for disunity or for polarized identities in Nigeria. If colonialism is said to have laid the foundation for polarized identities, then post-colonial Nigerian rulers consolidated on these divided identities and even sustained them. And at independence, what happened was that post-colonial rulers, they used regional identity, ethnicity, and religion to mobilize political support for each other. And although the early nationalists, they shared a vision of a unified Nigeria, but the competition they had for political power and their immense need to access economic resources of Nigeria made this vision of unified Nigeria impossible to achieve. What happened was that the political elites who inherited power from colonialists, they privatized the state, they exploited the state for their own benefits, and even used the state to oppress the populace. And when all of this was happening, the only option that the population had was to find solace in ethnic or religious identities. And this is what the political class still does today. Most people, unable to break through established political, economic, and social domination by regional elites, they turned away from the state in order to seek safety and fulfillment in their community and in their religious groups. And in many situations, this turning away from the state to seek solace in religious and ethnic groups has had devastating impact both on the people and on the country and at large. And I think nothing demonstrates just how devastating the impact of people turning away from the government can be, much more than the Boko Haram insurgency in northern Nigeria. This example, it shows how devastating it is when a group turns away from the state because of state failure and seeks solace in religious groups or in ethnic groups. Now let's turn our attention to how this happened with the case of Boko Haram. To start with, I'm going to give a brief about the Boko Haram group in Nigeria. As we may or may not know, this insurgency of Boko Haram holds the record of being one of the most deadliest insurgencies in Africa. Its leader, current leader Abubakar Shekau, who is shown here in front in black head, he holds the record of being the longest serving leader of any terrorist group in the world. And this was after he took over running the insurgent group from 2010, when the group resurfaced after it was attemptedly put down by the Nigerian government. At the peak of the insurgency in 2013-2014, Boko Haram controlled a geographical area that was as large as present geographical expanse of Belgium. Their most popular attack, I think, would be the 2014 abduction of about 300 girls from a secondary school in Chibok in Nigeria. What this attack did was that it teleported Boko Haram to international limelight, and it put them into the same cocoon as international jihadi organizations like ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Boko Haram currently has a breakout faction called the Islamic State West African Province, and this is the faction that is aligned more with ISIS. Boko Haram's insurgency or terrorism in the northeast of Nigeria has led to the internal and external displacement of over 4 million people. And currently, 3.1 million internally displaced persons live in the northeast of Nigeria, Maiduguri more, and then in Yobe and Adamawa states. The United Nations, at the middle of this year, they said that because of Boko Haram's insurgency, 10.2 million people living in the northeast of Nigeria require one form of humanitarian assistance or the other. The Council of Foreign Relations is one of the organizations that track the deaths that has occurred because of Boko Haram. And they have said that between May 2011, when they started to track, up until July 2020, Boko Haram's insurgency and counter-insurgency operations against the group has led to the death of 31,000 people. This is how powerful or how deadly Boko Haram is. The activities of Boko Haram became noticeable in Nigeria's northeast around the year 2000. And why northern Nigeria, you might ask? Why not somewhere else, southern Nigeria or eastern Nigeria? The very pivotal reason why Boko Haram started in northeast of Nigeria was because of poverty. And I know that there has been a lot of studies that have sought to find the correlation between poverty and terrorism. And most people agree that poverty does not automatically justify the emergence of a terrorist group in an area. That is true. But in northeast of Nigeria, this happened because when Boko Haram started, it did not start as a terror group that was throwing bombs around. They started as a welfare organization. I will come back to this welfareist disposition of Boko Haram. But right now, I want to give you a graphical representation of what poverty and the worst developmental indexes that northeastern Nigeria showed, which made it very easy for a terrorist organization to have come out of the area. Boko Haram is very active, or was very active, in 3 states: in Borno State, in Yobe State, and in Adamawa State, before they were able to spread attacks to other parts of Nigeria. These 3 states currently display the worst developmental indexes in the whole world, not in Africa, not in Nigeria, in the whole world. For example, in 2015, Nigeria's national poverty index stood at 46%. And out of this, Lagos, which is the social hub of southern Nigeria, had only 8% of its population living below poverty lines. The whole of the Northwest, the area where Boko Haram is active, rated 81%. It means that 81% of people living in the Northwest were living in poverty. Borno State, the epicenter of Boko Haram's attacks, it rated 70%. 70% of people were living in poverty. Yobe State, the second most active place where Boko Haram operates, had 90% of its population living below poverty. And of course, there were other problems like corruption, nepotism, the absence of basic infrastructure. All of these problems, including poverty, were rampant in all parts of Nigeria. But it was states like Borno, states like Yobe, who had already worse developmental indexes that felt the brunt of all of the other social and economic problems that the country was facing at that time. And in the eyes of many Northerners, the government of Nigeria had completely lost its legitimacy because the government was unable to provide basic amenities such as education, such as healthcare, infrastructure, security, employment opportunities, and a legal framework for law and order. And because the government had lost its legitimacy and people no longer believed that the government could help them, what happened was that people started to seek solace in self-help groups. And at this time, Boko Haram was positioned as one such self-help group. And this was because when Boko Haram started its evangelism, when they started their activities, like I said earlier, they didn't start as a terror group. Boko Haram started as a welfare group that provided different welfareist packages for its members. The first leader of Boko Haram, Muhammad Yusuf, then, he gathered a considerable number of students around him and he regularly fed them. He provided startup capital for his members. He bought bikes, motorbikes for people and gave it to youth for them to start to do the transportation business. This picture is a picture that shows one of the times, like it is a picture that showed the time when Muhammad Yusuf's house was attacked in 2019. And these bikes that are being burnt were some of the bikes that he had bought for his members and which they used for the transportation business. Apart from this, he provided also startup capital for his members to use for different other businesses so that they could become employed. He helped the youths mainly to get married by helping them to pay their bride price. And this was very important in the northern part of Nigeria because your dignity as a man was measured in if you were married or if you were not most times. He took care of widows, Muhammad Yusuf now. He took care of the widows of his members. He took care of the orphans. He took care of students around him by providing for them the variant of Boko Haram's Islamic education in his madrasa, that's in the Arabic school that he had in his house at this time. And because of all of these welfare packages that he provided, Boko Haram's membership at this time was consisted of different groups. It included students, it included bankers, it included government workers, it included, of course, beggars and young people who were living the life between the twin divide of criminality and crime at that time. So it had like a myriad of people were members. And I should state here that at this time, membership of the organization was voluntary. But it was not just welfare that Muhammad Yusuf and Boko Haram rode on. As I mentioned earlier, Boko Haram also used Islam in northern Nigeria to propagate an ideological disposition that only succeeded because there was already in existence in Nigeria a polarized Islamic religious identity. I know that I mentioned that religion is the most important marker, but what I didn't say at that time was that identity by religion in Nigeria is said to be the highest in the world. And according to the PEW Forum, who carried out a survey in 2006, 76% of Christians, they say that religion is more important to them than any other identity, either as Africans or as Nigerians. In this same survey, it was 91% of Muslims who say that religion is more important to them than any other identity. And the ability of religion to differentiate between believer and non-believer, or between right and wrong, it makes it a powerful ideology. And Muhammad Yusuf, when he started Boko Haram and when he founded the organization, he used this for his political means. He attributed that corruption in Nigeria and the perceived suffering of the Muslim, especially in northern Nigeria, was because the Muslims had embraced Western ways of life. And for them to be able to solve all of their problems, there was a need for them to remedy this situation by adhering to the Sharia law and by creating an Islamic state. I should state here clearly that the notion of reestablishing equality and social justice as propagated by Boko Haram, it aimed not at leveling out the differences within the population of Nigeria, but on the contrary, what it aimed at doing was consolidating the Muslim identity and consciously pitting this Muslim identity against other Nigerian identities, particularly those identities that could be depicted as non-believers, infidel, or Christians. But it was not just against this kind of identities. Boko Haram also pitted against other identities within Islam that did not subscribe to their own version of Islam. So if you were not Salafi, which Boko Haram was, or if you didn't believe in the pristine version of Salafism that Boko Haram was practiced, even if you were a Muslim, you were not the kind of Muslim that Boko Haram wanted. So with the birth of Boko Haram, religious identity had been harnessed for terrorist purposes. This is, in a nutshell, how religion and polarized identities within religion can be manipulated for terrorist purposes. I will talk about now the second situational example, which is the Me Too movement. You might wonder, how do we move from religious identities and terrorism to Me Too movement? What I intend to show here is that apart from religion, two other identity markers shape discourses in Nigeria. These are gender and age. And still, religious identity intersects with these two identity markers. In this section, I will discuss how the Me Too movement operated under gender identities to reveal a protracted patriarchal structure that continues to permeate social relationships in Nigeria up until today. We'll also discuss how the Me Too challenged age-based identities, destroying the established hierarchies of who gets to be heard in public and who does not. We would also highlight the role of social media in destroying these established hierarchies. As you are aware, the Me Too movement started first in the US, and the hashtag Me Too, it became popular when American actress Alyssa Milano used it in 2017 to ask the victims of Harvey Weinstein's sexual assaults to please come out and speak about their sexual assaults. And 24 hours after Alyssa used this hashtag, the Me Too hashtag had been used by 4.7 million people, 12 million times on Twitter, and this tweet had come from different countries, almost up to 85 different countries. And so it was a logical progression that this would come to Nigeria. And when it did, it came twice. Nigeria's Me Too moment came twice. The first occurred in February 2019. And this happened when, on Twitter, a pharmacist from northern Nigeria, a lady, she tweeted that she had suffered sexual abuse from her then ex-boyfriend. And when she made this tweet, there was a social media influencer then, Fakriya Hashim, who, just like Alyssa Milano, also asked people or other victims of sexual abuse to come out and tweet about their experiences using Arewa Me Too hashtag. The reason why she put Arewa was because she wanted to, Arewa means the north in Hausa, and she wanted to specify it to the people in northern Nigeria, like to northern Nigerian women who had gone through sexual abuse. And so she asked them to come out and use Arewa Me Too to tweet about their experiences. When she asked people to use Arewa Me Too, I'm sure she didn't expect the kind of response that she got. But from February 12th, when Fakiria tweeted about this, there was thousands of women who came out and shared their sexual violence experience using the hashtag. And the stories that people shared and the contexts were very varied. There was a user, for example, who said that it was her uncle who had abused her from the ages of 5 to 15. She mentioned that she had not received any kind of sexual sex education from her parents before this, and that she was forced to not reveal this attack or the abuse to people because her uncle was an elderly person and nobody would have believed her if she had said something bad about an elderly person. Apart from her, there was another lady who said it was a late husband and his friends who sexually abused her for years. I think another one that caught my attention was a young lady who said that it was an Arabic school tutor who came home to give them Arabic lessons who had been abusing her from the age of 9. An analysis of all of the Twitter feed from Arewa Me Too showed that 82% of the victims were less than 15 when their attacks occurred. It was from the ages of 0 to 15 had 82%. And 68% showed that these attacks, they occurred in places where people assumed to be safe spaces. Some of them occurred in the private homes of people, in schools, in Arabic schools sometimes, like where we thought or we assume as safe spaces were the places where most of the sexual attacks were taking place. The second Me Too moment of Nigeria happened in the south of Nigeria, and it happened in June 2019 when a lady, Busola Dakolo, who was the wife of a popular gospel singer, accused the head of one of the biggest churches in Nigeria, Biodun Fatoyinbo, of consistently raping her when she was a teenager, and this happened about 20 years ago. This accusation, which she granted when she granted an interview, it led to the continuous trending of the hashtag #MeToo and ChurchToo on Twitter, and so much that after the Sunday that followed this trending of the hashtag, there were people, hundreds of protesters in front of the church of the pastor who asked him to resign. These two Me Too moments, what they did was that they defined the moments of gender activism in the history of Nigeria. The first thing they did was that they made the voices of individuals who would normally not be heard in public because of their age and because of their gender, they made their voices to be heard. Specifically for the women in northern Nigeria, who, because of tradition, because of the conservativeness of Islam in this society, who would not be heard, they've been confined to spaces where they would not be seen and not be heard. Arewa Me Too especially made their voices to be heard. And of course, we cannot dispel the role or the vital role that social media played in making sure that these people, their voices were heard. So the second thing that these Me Too moments did was that they helped to dispel, they helped to circumvent the customary rule of discourses where the elders were the information gatekeepers. They were the people who determined whether something became social discourse or does not become social discourse. Arewa Me Too helped to dispel this. And this was because social media, because of the physical anonymity that it granted, because it didn't need any kind of meeting between the abused and the perpetrator, because it didn't need any kind of taking of how do you call it? It didn't need any kind of permission to be granted to the young women who shared their stories. It just helped and made it easier for these young women to share their stories without having to resort to taking permission from elderly people. And because of how impactful Arewa Me Too and Busola Dakolo's Me Too moments were, and the fact that there was no way to dispel these stories, there was no way to cast any negative light on the stories, What happened was that religious identities were whipped up in order to be able to dispel and cast a negative light on the two Me Too movements. I would show you the tweets or reactions that some of the men, or mostly the men, the kind of reactions that it showed to the Me Too stories that were shared by some of the women. And the first one, for example, says, the so-called Arewa Me Too is against our religion and culture. Something bad happened to you, and you happen to be an innocent victim to it, and no one knows about it. It is between you and your creator. Instead of you to keep silent, you come on this platform and you are exposing yourself. The second example is, the right place to seek justice is not with the mob. You take your case to a court of competent jurisdiction, or you leave it to the court of Allah. If a woman reveals that she has been raped, she leaves room for much to be imagined. It desecrated her honor. I'm calling on reasonable and responsible Arewa girls, ladies and women. Do not expose something which Allah has concealed from your evils, committed by your intentions or against your consent. Arewa Me Too is simply a hidden agenda against your religion. What I want to point out with these three tweets is that the three of them, from three different individuals, men, they do not deny that the sexual abuse which the victims reported had occurred. However, on the premise that these women were exposing what society deems as a private affair, these people decided that the act of sexual violence should be disregarded in order to uphold a seemingly more important religious injunction, which is to keep something that is private, private. And I don't know if you noticed, but all three tweets also direct the negative impact of exposing this private affair to the victim. For example, when the men, they use this notion of you are exposing yourself, or by exposing this, you desecrate your honor, or why are you exposing what Allah has concealed of your evils? All of this is referring to the victim, the woman in this situation. And it's a blatant attempt at victim shaming. And of course, it shows that patriarchal domination is vibrant in northern and southern Nigeria, just as it is in most parts of the world. And this attempt, this display where victims are shamed, but the perpetrators are exonerated, what it shows is that Nigeria's patriarchal spaces, just like patriarchal spaces in other parts of the world, they are complicit in the abuse of women. The North and South of Nigeria's reaction to the Me Too movement, based on potent religious tenets, has shown that polarized religious identities not only suppresses common reasoning when challenged, but are also, in certain cases, used to conceal other identity markers like gender and age-based identity polarization. And as these discussions on social media clearly show, the question as to what is considered to be social justice, it may lead to a widely differing and at times even opposing answers. And this is depending on who is considered to have a voice in the debate, who is being listened to, and who is actually being heard. The last institutional example I'm going to talk about today is with EndSARS. This movement, EndSARS, it was basically led by young people, and they organized themselves using social media. So for me, it was a very good example that fits into the topic or the concept for the whole of the conference itself. The reason why I chose EndSARS as the last institutional example is because the movement and the process of how it unraveled, it combines the elements of hierarchical gerontocracy, which was shattered yet again, just like it was with the Me Too movements. And I also chose it because I believe that EndSARS was basically an identity conflict between the young and old in Nigeria. With this example, we will see how young people aim at overcoming divisive identities and to unite across ethnic, religious, and different boundaries using social media. They tried to do what Helena was referring to in the opening remarks this morning. They attempted to allow pluralism to work peacefully. But of course, because of gerontocracy, where older people are supposed to be highly regarded for their wisdom and knowledge of community affairs, the reaction to the demands of these young people was met with high-handedness and disdain. And this is because gerontocracy, or this divide between the young and the old, has led to the permeation of an authoritarian order where the elderly people and the elites see themselves as being in charge, and this has continued to galvanize age-based polarized identities. But let's start from the beginning. SAS is the Special Anti-Robbery Squad, and it is a unit of the Nigerian police that was established in 1992 to fight different crimes, including armed robbery and cyber crimes. However, over time, the unit has morphed to become a terrorizing law enforcement force. They target youths between the ages of 15 and 35, profiling them on the way they dress, the kind of phones they use, the kind of cars they drive, their sexual orientation, and even the jobs that they do. So if you are a young man, you're driving across the street, you have an expensive car, you're wearing ripped jeans, you have piercings or dreadlocks, or you have a tattoo, you would most probably be stopped by a SAS official. And the reason is because according to the rules by which SAS officials operate within, young people, they are not expected to have made so much money to be able to afford iPhones or drive expensive cars. And according to SAS officials, the young people who are able to do this at this time, they are definitely internet fraudsters or armed robbers. And without being arrested or charged for any specific crimes, SAS operatives have been known to indiscriminately search phones, going through your text messages to find the text messages from your bank, which would show your account balance. SAS officials have been known to go through your pictures, blatantly invading people's privacy. They have been known to extort money from their victims, matching people at gunpoint to ATMs to collect money, everything, because they would have seen how much was in your account, and then they would ask you to withdraw everything at gunpoint at an ATM machine. SAS operatives have been known to arrest people, torture them, detain them, and kill indiscriminately. Between January 2017 and May 2020, Amnesty International recorded 82 different cases of torture, ill treatment, and extrajudicial execution by SAS. That's how notorious this unit of the police had become. Every year since 2017, one brutal SAS attack would lead to the trending of End SARS on Twitter or on Instagram or on social media applications. And this happened in 2017, it happened in 2018, 2019. And every time this has happened, the Nigerian government has reacted by saying that they are going to reform the organization, or sometimes they say that they have scrapped the organization, basically paying lip service to the agitations of people about SARS online. And again, on October 3rd, 2020, a particularly brutal SARS attack led to the trending of End SARS on Twitter. In this particular attack, it showed a video of a young man who had been shot, and SARS operatives were making away with his car. And this video started to trend on Instagram, started to trend on Twitter, and garnered about 28 million tweets on its first weekend alone. But everything about this current End SARS agitation on Twitter would be different. The first was that it was the first time that End SARS would move from an online agitation to an offline agitation. It started on October 3rd, and by October 8th, celebrities in Nigeria had been able to mobilize for a peaceful protest in Lagos. And it started from Lagos on October 8th and then spread to other parts of Nigeria. Another unique thing about this current EndSARS protest was that it had no discernible leadership. There was not one person who came out to say, I am the head of this organization. And this was because the youths who were in charge or who mobilized for this, they were wary of having somebody who they feel like the government can either corrupt or influence. So there was no discernible leadership. The third, and I think the most important, unique aspect of this 2020 EndSARS protest was the role that digital technologies played in the protest. First of all, Twitter was used to mobilize, of course, people and also to mobilize specific locations where the protests were supposed to take place. But more importantly, Twitter and other platforms were used to call the attention of the international community, both celebrities, politicians, footballers. They were used to call the attention to the movement. And I think this role of international attention that was called was what embarrassed the Nigerian government into acting, because for the first 2 days of the protest, they were blatantly ignored. Nothing was done about it. At the time, digital platforms became the only sources of information about EndSARS because directly or indirectly, the Nigerian government had gagged mainstream media from reporting about the EndSARS protest. Also, digital platforms were used to crowdsource and to fund, to get money to run the different activities of the EndSARS protest. And it was so unique and so different because the youths who were coming out, they were so organized, they cleaned up after themselves. They had a radio station where they had a helpline where they helped people. The ones who were lawyers among them were helping arrested protesters to get bail. They provided food and medical services for the protesters. And this continued from October 3rd up until October 20th. Why is EndSARS important in the context of identity polarization in Nigeria? The reason it is because the movement itself, especially the 2020 movement, shattered the culture of gerontocracy and deference to elders that Nigeria vibrantly operates. Nigeria, like I said, has about 200 million population. And of this, 70% of the population are below 30 years. This means that 135 million Nigerians are actually youths. But as SARS protests showed, many of the youths are of the opinion that the older generation, from the ages of 50 and above, were the real causes of all of the problems in Nigeria because they have been cowardly, never confronting the leadership of the country and continuously praying away their problems. So from the beginning, the protesters made it clear that they would not be open to comments or advice from people that they considered elderly. And I remember listening to a radio station where the commenters kept saying that if you're above the age of 50, please don't call in and comment on the protest. We do not want to listen to you. We think that you're the problem of this country. So leave us, the youths, to fix the problems that you caused. The elderly and the political elite, on their part, they view the youths as inexperienced and the generation that is always in a rush, always on the internet, addicted to mobile phones. And this is the reason, this view that the youths are not their children, they are immature. This is the reason why the elders systematically do not allow the younger generation to participate in politics. And because of this, political apathy with the youth is very vibrant, and the elderly people, they have become the greater participants in politics, and they have become the highest number of people that have been elected into political office. But when the same youths, when they used their so-called addiction to the internet to demand for social justice in the form of an end to police brutality, the elders, acting on age-long traditions of entitled respect, they acted as they always had. First, they ignored the online protest as the usual rants of the young people. Then they decided, okay, let's react. And then they condescendingly paid lip service to the protest by saying that, oh, we have reformed SARS, we're turning it now to SWAT. And then, oh, we are reorganizing the police unit and sending all of the officers to different police units. But when the protesters, these young people who have been termed the internet generation, when they refused to fall for the gimmicks of the elderly and the politicians and the elites, because they know how this goes. The elites picked offense. And like a child who refused to be placated would be dealt with, the government decided on the 12th day of the protest, October 20th, they decided to order the military to open fire on peaceful protesters, killing about 12 of them in Lagos. And these are the only official numbers that we have. We do not know unofficially how many people were killed in that Lagos massacre on October 20th, 2020. The government's reaction to end SARS protest, including the refusal of the president to acknowledge that this Lagos massacre even took place. It was because end SARS movement shattered Nigeria's culture of deference to elderly and elites. And as the youths were not expected to question the actions of elders by demanding social justice, end SARS defied the traditional order of age-based identity hierarchy. But the powers that be would not have this. And this is the reason why they reacted the way they reacted. Retrospectively, if we want to talk about social justice, the questions we should ask are, what does social justice mean when people do not consider themselves as equals or equally entitled to social goods? And if a society is not created around the narrative that all members are equal, but rather consists of a dynamic patchwork of overlapping, entangled, and sometimes opposing identities, the kind that I've just described that Nigeria is, where do we even start to think and talk about social justice? In this kind of society, should everyone be treated the same? Or should everyone be treated according to their respective claims to identities? If a society is based on traditional hegemonies that control who should be seen or who should be heard in public, how is social justice supposed to work in such a society? If the age, gender, and societal position already posits inequality, how should justice be socially accrued in such a society? And if when I said retrospectively, you were expecting a conclusive remark to close this discussion, I'm sorry to disappoint you, because this kind of conversations cannot be concluded. They can only be opened up for further discussion and analysis, and that's what I'm about to do right now. Thank you very much for having me again speak at the conference. I wish you all a very inciting and engaging conference on social justice. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Medinat. I mean, really so inspiring. And I think the way that everything has been divided gives us insight on so many topics that are relevant now, but also super relevant to identity polarization. And honestly, I was so, just very inspired at the different angles at which you came to it. So we have a lot of chats and comments happening, but also some questions. I thought we could take a couple of them. The first one was actually a quicker one, was from Caleb about Boko Haram. So his question was, when Boko Haram was providing welfare, was the government involved?
Definitely no. Like we said, the reason why people actually turned to Boko Haram was because the government was not involved in providing any of these welfareist dispositions. And at this time, of course, it was like the government decided, of course, to ignore, because they said, oh, they were not doing any harm at this time. They were just providing jobs for people. They were providing startup capital to people. So there's no need. They didn't get involved. And this is just because the government was not involved was the reason why people turned to Boko Haram in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Another Boko Haram question also regarding Boko Haram and poverty levels in northern Nigeria. What is the role of masculinities in the organization's initial formation and now identity? This is from Heather.
If I understand the question well, masculinities has to do with the role played by patriarchal spaces of male and female specifically. I would say at the beginning, of course, a lot of religious activities when it comes to Islam is more centered on the male, and the female place is supposed to be in more private specifically. And so because of this, the membership of Boko Haram at this time had females. I wouldn't say that they didn't have females, because even if the members were male, because Muhammad Yusuf was taking care of the widows and the orphans and the children of his members, it also means that these children, whether they were male or female, were active or passive members of Boko Haram at this time. So actively, I would say it had more male members, of course. They are the ones at the beginning who attended Muhammad Yusuf's teachings, who benefited mostly from his welfare dispositions and all of that. And now, eventually, when the organization morphed, there was also a bit of change. When they couldn't get any more voluntary conscription of male people, when the organization turned violent in 2010, they couldn't get voluntary conscription of the male at that time, so they had to resort to kidnapping. And when they decided on different tactics like kidnapping, of course, the females became a veritable prize at this time. When they kidnapped about 300 girls, it was at that time not understood that they would actually bring the females actively into their terrorist organization. It was assumed that the girls who were kidnapped were only going to be bargaining chips for Boko Haram. But when they could no longer voluntarily conscript into the organization and they realized that they needed to change their terrorist tactics, they started to use the females as bomb carriers sometimes, because the females could disguise, they could wear long hijabs, they could move into soft target places like markets and all of that. So even when Maiduguri was very, very high on alert about males on bikes and males who had mustache and all of that, Boko Haram had changed at this time their tactics to use the females. So I think it was oscillating based on whatever decision the organization decided to use as their tactics then. Masculinity, it just suited them. They played this gender thing based on how best it suited them, how best they wanted to respond to also counterinsurgency operations. When it was too much, they would also turn to females. So mixed. And I think there have been a lot of research that have actually talked about the role of females specifically in the Dawla itself, and in the, not just in the fight, but in, for example, females that have been captured. How did they influence the life in the Islamic community that was created by Boko Haram? How did the females play into the power structure that Boko Haram was trying to show? There have been women also who have come out to, when they are, after they've been rescued, to say, oh, we feel better treated when we're under Boko Haram, because in the Islamic state that Boko Haram was, they give some kind of different powers to females that made them feel special, and we don't get this when we are no longer with Boko Haram. So like this issue of gender, masculinity, and how they played in the identity of the organization, I think it has more been manipulated by what the group wants to achieve at a specific point in time, and this is how they use it.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I'll go to another question that's also sort of specific to one of the events that you covered. It was about the Me Too movement. So how did women, this is from Khadija, how did women in the Me Too movement in Nigeria react to reactions like the ones that you mentioned, the Twitter comments that you presented? Did this make the movement stronger or weaker?
Women, of course, there was a lot of, and I think this is very natural, there was a lot of sympathy, especially with this kind of stories that were shared and the kind of reaction that this provoked especially. And I think what I noticed with the Twitter comments that were from females were actually how negligent the females kind of realized that they have been. For example, like I said, about 68% of the assaults happened in where it's termed safe spaces, where in the homes and in schools. And like most of the reactions that I see from females were about how could we have been negligent as mothers because we are in this home. So how could this kind of things be happening under our noses and we didn't know? And of course, this also plays into this identity polarization where the females are supposed to be home and not be heard and be taking care of the family, and then the males are supposed to be, so they kind of exonerate that they remove the father from any blame, and the mothers who are supposed to be home and taking care of the children are the ones that are kind of guilt-tripped, in my opinion, because I believe that child rearing is the job of both the parents. So if something goes wrong with your child, the fact that you are the woman who is home or who does not work, that's what I noticed anyways. Like, the women were more concerned about the fact that they've been negligent in their duties as northern women, that they are not paying so much attention to their children is the reason why this kind of abuses and this high number of abuses could be happening under their noses, basically. And of course, there were also a lot of them who tried to always argue with some of the tweets that the men brought. For example, I remember there were some tweets that the way the ladies were dressed was one of the justifications, of course, that the men would use to say, if you didn't dress this way, if you didn't dress that way, then you would not have been abused. If you had followed Allah's injunctions to always wear hijab, you would not have been abused, and all of that. And I remember a lot of females came out to say that I was wearing a hijab. I was wearing a full-fledged hijab. I was in Haram. I was in Saudi Arabia. I was doing Hajj in my full hijab, and somebody tried to sexually assault me in front of the Kaaba. Like, they tried to counter some of this BS arguments. I'm sorry about my French, that the males were putting forward about the reasons that could have justified this kind of abuses with this kind of things and all of that. Yeah, and so this, yes, and I think there was also a part of the question that says, did this make the movement to be stronger? I think one of the things, especially what the women did, I found very remarkable, was that after Arewa Me Too specifically trended on Twitter and on other social platforms, there was a group of women who decided, and I think there were some men among them, but it was more championed by women, who decided that we're going to take this conversation off social media and start sex education groups in different schools, where children from the ages of maybe 11 to 18 who are still in senior and junior secondary schools, we would talk to them and tell them what they should look out for, what abuse looks like. It doesn't have to do with somebody. The main goal for them was that we don't have to wait for example, our children to be locked up in some room and forcefully had sexual encounter. But if somebody touches you in a weird way, if somebody asks you to like open your private, like, their major aim was to teach the children how to see or how to know what sexual abuse looks like at the early stages before it grows into full-fledged sexual assault. So this, for me, was one of the ways that the moments became bigger, because they went offline and they became more practical. Yeah.
So interesting to hear about those offline iterations that I personally hadn't known about. So there's more, we have 15 minutes left, and there's some kind of more overarching questions. Yeah, time flew. I'll take Nabil's question, which says, before asking each ethnic group to sit down for a discussion or a conversation, how can we approach such people who have somehow extreme standpoints? So more about bringing people together. Yeah, there's a lot of those big questions in the Q&A. We'll go through them.
Well, I don't know if I have like the best answer to how to bring people together, because there have been various attempts at doing this, especially in such a polarized society that Nigeria is. But I think that my simple answer to this would be that whatever plan or whatever program that you decide to use to bring people together, it should first of all be very fitted to the situation of the people you're bringing together. So do not bring, for example, some foreign interventions from a different society and try to adapt it to a society, to any other society. It has to be something that is tailor-made for the situation of these people you're trying to bring together. The second is that the agency of the people you're attempting to bring together, I think it should be the bane or the basis for any kind of unifying program that you want to do. These people know, for example, what is actually dividing them. They know also how they could do away with this division, because, for example, when people use identities like religion and ethnicity or something to divide people, There are other ways also they know that they can bring these people together, and the people themselves know how they can unify and dispel their divisive identities. So I think two ways, short answers, is that first of all, no foreign intervention. And when I say foreign intervention, I don't mean I just mean that it should be tailor-made to the situation of the people. And secondly is that the agency of the people has to be the root of such programs or such attempts at bringing them together. Yes.
Definitely, yes. Yeah, definitely appreciate as well kind of the rejection of that cookie cutter approach for something so nuanced. So Yasser also had, you kind of touched on this for Rukmini's question, which was that, would you be able to comment on current efforts to combat this polarization? Maybe you talked in a more general way about how it can happen, but if you have any ideas about current efforts that you can share with us.
Yes, I think it was in one of the programs that we're talking about where we had specific programs. For example, in Nigeria, the youths have been championing a lot, in my opinion, various efforts online. There has been, for example, I don't want to use NSAS again because there was a part of NSAS where I said that for me, this was one of the best ways that people could have united. And people did unite, ignoring their ethnic or religious or social backgrounds. People united in order to start NSAS. And so for me, I have seen a lot of youth organize themselves with different programs. I've seen also social media platforms, not all of them. Some of them use also, for example, the entertainment industry. They use the following, for example, of international celebrities to pass across messages that they know that the youth would listen to because it's their favorite celeb that is championing this. I have seen also religious leaders who are young. And I'm sorry that I keep talking about this age divide between the people who are actually building unifying platform and peace. But it's for me, it's because I believe that it's the current generation who are in the loop of these problems. They are the best people who are in the position to find the solutions to the problem. So apart from using international celebrities, I've seen also young religious leaders like Mufti Mengs, who has a very large international followership and who uses religion to build unified programs and unified teachings, which for me are much more viable because this is something that I would understand. Mufti Menk, for example, is on Twitter, is on Facebook. He knows the newest updates. He's very, very Zen in that concept, and this is the people that people would listen to at this point. So for me, these are some of the attempts that I have seen online and offline of people trying to unify.
Awesome, thank you for that. And I think that also touches on Kuwal's question about what the future for young people, or what hope and optimisms do we have from young people now beyond the NSAR's protests. So that tied in well. Last couple of questions were, so how does, actually let's skip that till the end. Are there any external roots for the polarization that you mentioned other than the colonial regime?
External, yeah. For me, we would have to do some kind of big research to find out if there are others. And so I wouldn't give a definite yes or a definite no. But for now, I do not think that these problems of Nigeria, when it comes to divisive identities, have any external base apart from colonialism. And I also was very quick to say that, of course, we can say that colonialism might have been the basis and is external. But Nigeria has been independent for 60 years now. And it has been Nigerians who have been in the helm of affairs of this country for 60 years. So we should kind of stop placing so much importance on colonialism because we've had an opportunity to change the situation for 60 years and we have not done that. So yes, external colonialism, for now, I don't see any other.
Mm-hmm. And on in the same realm about Boko Haram as well, Frida was asking, how does such a powerful group in Nigeria affect the country's elections?
Right now, maybe not. The reason is because now the organization has gone underground and has been declared a terrorist organization. But at the beginning, when it was still at the point when it was an organization that was seen more as a religious movement, and when it was giving out this, for example, welfareist disposition, where Muhammad Yusuf had a large following based on the fact that he was helping the youth, there were reports that he had such a large amount of youths that were his followers that the governor of the state of Borno State at that time had to go talk to him in order to gain the support of his followers. And this support was some people said it was for the youths to vote for him, and some said it was because he needed youths who could help him rig elections. And somehow, this kind of brought Muhammad Yusuf into the political sphere of the country. Even though he was a religious leader, his role and the fact that he had a large following meant that he had become a bloc that politicians were seeking approval or seeking his support in order to be able to win elections. And I remember then newspaper reports coming out to say that Muhammad Yusuf helped Ali Modu Sharif, who was then the governor of the state, to win the election and become the governor. And it was the fact that the governor, the things that he promised Muhammad Yusuf and the group, he refused or he renegated on his promise, was the reason why Boko Haram turned on him when he became governor, and they started to speak bad against him because he didn't fulfill his promises to them when they helped him to win elections. And of course, this has a lot of political gimmicks going on and all of that, but we don't talk in the realm of things that don't have scientific proof, in my opinion. So yes, we cannot dismiss the fact that Boko Haram was vibrant in politics at this time, at the time before 2010, when they became a full-fledged terrorist group. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and last question from Sanjay. Do you know of examples of how elders' condescendence has been turned into a conversation of equals, and what worked there?
I laugh because equals, elders, they're not two words that you see in the same sentence in the Nigerian context. It's never going to happen. It's so bad. I'm going to give you an adage that it's very popular in this context of elders and young people and gerontocracy in Nigeria. And this adage is mostly by the elderly. They say that what we, the elderly, can see while we sit down, you young people, you cannot see it even if you climb on top of a tree. And this is the way they deal with young people. And I remember that during the NSAS protest, for example, when somebody made this, there was an elderly who made this assertion and said, "You guys don't know what you're doing. What we can see while we're sitting down, even if you people climb on top of a tree, you cannot see it." And then I remember the young person replied, "We don't need to climb on top of a tree. We're going to use drones to see whatever you're seeing while you're sitting." That's the conversation. That's
wow.
That's it. So, like, Sanjay, I don't know if I can say what worked. No, I don't think so. It doesn't work. Like, you need a level playing field. You need a high level of understanding. You need a high level of formal and Zen education to be able to bring adults and young people on the same table in Nigeria to have a conversation where both of them can view themselves as equal. And even in those kind of conversations, you can still not refer to people as equals. There's still going to be this spirit of the fact that some people are older, some people are younger, and this is always going to control the conversations, the views you're expected to have, whether they're going to agree with you or not, whether you're going to have an impact on such conversations. It's always going to be there.
Very reminiscent of some of the places we come from as well. The dynamics are also very interesting to hear about. So I think that's all the questions we had in the Q&A. And I don't know if nobody added anything. So we have a couple of minutes. Do you have anything else to add? Any closing remarks before we close? So thank you so much, Dr. Medinat. Really such a great overview and also such a great delving into these details that I personally, just benefited so much for to listen to. So thanks for your time. Thanks everyone for your attention. And join us at the coffee break speed date next. And yeah, thanks again.